This was meant to be a crowning jewel of the social calendar, a warm family celebration orchestrated within the hallowed halls of a sprawling estate, where the air shimmered with the classical strains of live music and the dazzling brilliance of antique crystal chandeliers. But everything is about to shatter the moment a jealous mistress, fueled by audacious pride, decides to publicly humiliate the wife in front of the entire elite gathering. She pours a full glass of blood-red wine down the front of the wife's cream gown and believes she has secured her victory, her place. She has no idea that the most influential and respected man in the entire Montgomery dynasty is moments away from walking through those doors, witnessing the wreckage of the carefully constructed piece, and delivering a decisive slap. A sound that will echo across the vast marble halls and permanently reshape the family's future. What follows is a fierce, unforgiving showdown of naked betrayal, defiant pride, and a rare moment of justice brought down by the one man no one present expected to intervene. Let us know what time you are listening and where you are tuning in from. Drop a comment below. We would love to hear from you. The Montgomery family mansion, a fortress of inherited wealth and power, seemed to radiate a luminous, almost intimidating warmth under the soft glow of the early evening lights. This was more than a home. It was a dynasty, a structure that felt imbued with a history so palpable it pulsed with latent energy even in absolute silence. Tonight, however, it vibrated with the kinetic charge of a major dynastic gathering. Dozens of impeccably dressed guests circulated throughout the ballroom. The light from massive crystal chandeliers fractured across polished marble floors, scattering diamonds of brightness. Soft, sophisticated jazz drifted through the air, providing a delicate sonic backdrop that blended seamlessly with the murmur of polite laughter and the gentle clinking of expensive glasses. Everything shimmered with the suffocating weight of luxury, tradition, and generational old money. Evelyn stood near a long buffet table draped in pristine white linen. She held a glass of sparkling water, consciously trying to regulate her shallow breathing. Family events of this magnitude always left her feeling slightly exposed, acutely nervous. Not because the Montgomerys were overtly cruel, but because they were perpetually watching, always measuring, always judging with curated smiles that never quite reached the cold depths of their eyes. She pressed her palm lightly against her dress, smoothing an invisible crease in the fabric. Her choice of attire, a soft cream gown, was deliberately modest, a strategy chosen not for fashion but for survival. It was elegant, yes, but intended only to blend into the luxurious background, a quiet rejection of the spotlight that the Montgomery name inevitably drew. Her dark hair was pinned neatly behind her ear in a simple, unobtrusive style. She felt adequately invisible and comfortable, until she saw Olivia. And just like that, the entire atmosphere fractured. Olivia materialized near the grand central staircase, not walking so much as commanding the space, a scarlet blaze erupting in a room of muted sophistication. Her red velvet dress was a blatant challenge, clinging to her figure, designed specifically to capture and retain every gaze. Her heels tapped against the marble floor with an aggressive, arrogant precision. She offered dazzling, practiced smiles to distant relatives who barely knew her name but acted as if she were already the chatelaine of the mansion. Her elaborate blonde curls bounced with theatrical energy on each step, and her confident smirk plainly stated that she relished every single eye that turned her way. Evelyn stiffened, the muscles in her neck locking. She had clung to the desperate hope that Olivia would choose to stay home tonight. But of course, she was here. Olivia always ensured her presence was felt most acutely when she knew it would sting the deepest. Marcus, Evelyn's husband, trailed a step or two behind Olivia, sporting a wide, utterly oblivious grin. He leaned in and whispered something conspiratorial to the mistress, which caused Olivia to erupt in a loud, careless burst of laughter. Too loud for the respectful acoustics of a family gathering this formal. Too loud for a man who was still legally, publicly married. Evelyn felt the telltale rush of humiliation heat her cheeks, but her practiced mask held firm. She lifted her glass of sparkling water, taking a slow, steady sip, a mechanical motion born of years spent mastering the art of swallowing bitter pain in absolute silence. A group of older, influential relatives approached Marcus to offer their greetings. He gave each of them a charming, polished smile, then immediately leaned closer to Olivia once they'd passed. He did not once spare a glance for his wife across the room, the woman who bore his name. The jazz music shifted tempo, resolving into a brighter, slightly more urgent melody, as waiters expertly navigated the crowd with heavy silver trays. Evelyn shifted discreetly aside so as not to impede their passage. She tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear and forced her focus onto anything, the light refraction, the ceiling molding. Anything but her husband and his mistress laughing intimately together in the center of the room. She turned her gaze toward the massive grand piano positioned in a quiet corner. A young musician played with delicate, focused fingertips. The long, sustained notes of the melody floated through the air like fine silk thread, offering momentary respite. For a brief interval, Evelyn allowed herself to sink into that gentle, soothing rhythm. A fleeting moment of calm amidst the suffocating noise, but calm never survived long in Olivia's orbit. A sharp flash of scarlet velvet caught her eye, and Evelyn realized with a jolt that Olivia was no longer drifting or socializing politely. She was walking directly toward her. Not gliding, but advancing with cold purpose, possessing the kind of predatory grace one might see just before a strike. Marcus followed a few lazy steps behind, casually sipping champagne, carrying the relaxed confidence of a man who genuinely believed he was untouchable inside these ancestral walls. Evelyn kept her posture perfectly steady, refusing to shrink. Guests noticed the imminent collision and subtly backed away, instinctively creating an unspoken, circular stage around the approaching trio. The polite chatter instantly softened. The air thickened, heavy with expectation. Olivia stopped precisely in front of Evelyn. Her smile was sharp, calculated, entirely devoid of warmth. "Well, look who decided to attend after all." Her voice carried just enough projection for several nearby guests to distinctly overhear the barbed comment. Evelyn blinked slowly, a measured effort to steady her nerves. "Good evening, Olivia." Olivia laughed with theatrical, fake surprise. "Good evening? That is honestly all you have to say while wearing that dress?" She scanned Evelyn from head to toe in a slow, deliberately insulting sweep. "It looks a little simple for an event in this mansion, but I suppose you wore the best thing your limited taste could find." Marcus took another leisurely sip of champagne. Not one word of defense offered to his wife. Not even a quick, cautionary glance. Evelyn felt her hands instinctively tighten their grip around her empty glass. She met Olivia's gaze directly, refusing to look away. "I am comfortable in it." Olivia's smirk deepened. "Comfortable? Yes, that is an interesting word for someone who is one tiny mistake away from being entirely irrelevant here." Before Evelyn could formulate a response that might preserve her dwindling dignity, Olivia abruptly reached out to a nearby waiter. She plucked a full glass of deep red wine from his tray. She swirled the liquid gently, raising her eyebrows at Evelyn with malignant anticipation. "This color might genuinely help your outfit. It needs something bold to make a statement." Evelyn took a small step back, her gut screaming a warning. The guests surrounding them leaned in, paralyzed between the urge to intervene and the morbid need to watch the spectacle unfold. Olivia did not hesitate. She tilted her wrist, a gesture practiced yet utterly vicious, and emptied the entire glass of deep red Cabernet down the front of Evelyn's cream gown. The liquid exploded against the silk like a violent crimson waterfall, the delicate fabric absorbing the stain instantly, irrevocably. Gasps erupted throughout the immediate vicinity. The pianist fumbled, hitting a dissonant chord that sliced through the air, and the music instantly died. Evelyn stood perfectly frozen, breath caught in her throat. The cold wine slid stickily down her skin, soaking through the layers. Her dress looked as if it had been slashed open, bisected by a streak of fresh blood. Olivia smiled sweetly, her victory secured, and whispered loud enough for every horrified guest to hear. "There, now you look like you belong." The entire ballroom fell into a stunned, profound silence. Every phone camera subtly lifted, ready to capture the fallout. The night, truly, had only just begun. For a long, unbearable moment, the grand ballroom remained suspended in absolute, breathless silence. It was as if the very marble walls held their breath, waiting. Every single guest stood petrified, locked between consuming shock and stark disbelief. The soft, elegant glow of the chandeliers reflected mercilessly in the expanding dark red stain that had colonized the front of Evelyn's cream gown. The wine saturated the delicate silk fabric and began to drip slowly, unevenly onto the polished marble floor. Evelyn felt utterly exposed, as if she were trapped beneath a blinding spotlight that had been maliciously focused only on her. Her pulse hammered a frantic rhythm in her ears. Her fingers tightened involuntarily around the delicate stem of her now empty water glass. Her throat felt painfully dry, despite the cool, sticky liquid that still clung to her skin and the ruined cloth. She could already hear the whispers beginning to coalesce, the secretive kind, intended to be private but loud enough to inflict the deepest wounds. Someone near the back gasped softly, a sound of horror. Another guest quickly clamped a hand over her own mouth. A waiter froze mid-stride, his silver tray balanced precariously, unsure whether to retreat or intervene. The pianist stood up awkwardly from the bench, genuinely uncertain whether to try continuing the music or simply abandon the room entirely. The atmosphere of warmth and festivity had been instantly, brutally shattered. The jazz, the luxury, the laughter, all gone, replaced by a charged silence. Olivia watched Evelyn intently, scrutinizing her for any sign of a breakdown. Her bright red lips curled into a smile of profound satisfaction, the kind of look that belongs to someone who believes they have finally, decisively won the war. She casually handed her empty wine glass back to the young waiter, who looked genuinely terrified even to touch it. Olivia clearly did not care about his distress. Marcus finally stepped forward with a loud sigh. It was not a sigh of concern for his wife, nor was it a sigh of guilt. It was the heavy, irritable sigh of a man utterly inconvenienced by a public scene. He pinched the bridge of his nose dramatically, framing the gesture as if Evelyn were the one who had embarrassed him. Not Olivia, not himself, but his own wife. "For heaven's sake, Evelyn," he muttered under his breath, harsh and low. "You always take everything so personally." He looked around at the onlookers and raised his voice slightly, adopting a tone of benevolent authority. She bumped into the glass. It was an accident. It was devastatingly clear to every soul present that no such accident had occurred. Olivia had poured the wine with deliberate, joyous malice. The guests knew, the staff knew, and even Marcus knew the truth, but he chose to manufacture a lie anyway, prioritizing the optics. Evelyn swallowed slowly, feeling a small, internal tremor move through her chest. She lifted her gaze and met Marcus's eyes directly. He looked away instantly. The flicker of shame on his face lasted barely a second before he smoothly recomposed himself, forcing a practiced, charming smile for the onlookers. "Let us all relax," he announced, as if he could magically dispel the thick tension with cheap charm. "It is just a little wine. Just a little wine, on a custom, irreplaceable dress, ruined in front of dozens of influential relatives, on a night that was supposed to preserve the illusion of their peaceful family." His voice twisted the knife in her back without outwardly raising it. Evelyn stared down at the rapidly expanding stain on her gown. She touched the fabric lightly. The texture already felt different. Sticky, heavy, irrevocably ruined. A violent bubbling sensation inside her chest threatened to spill over. It was not anger alone. It was the fusion of absolute humiliation, deep personal hurt, and the searing agony of betrayal, all wrapped together so tightly she could hardly draw a breath. A soft whisper brushed her left ear. "Oh dear, poor thing." Another whisper came from the right. "Did you see how she just stood there? I would have slapped her." Someone else murmured, low and viciously judgmental. Marcus should control his women. And there it was. The true, crushing verdict. Words that carried the weight of 100 silent judgments against her. Evelyn closed her eyes for half a second, praying. She wanted desperately to disappear, to simply sink into the polished floor, to become invisible, but the world refused to look away from the disaster. Her aunt by marriage, Alara, A kind older woman with soft silver hair and genuinely warm eyes approached her slowly. She reached out and grasped Evelyn's arm gently. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her voice filled with quiet distress. "Let us get you cleaned up and away from this." Before Evelyn could follow, Olivia laughed again. A harsh, triumphant sound that cut through the room like shattered glass. "No need to help her," Olivia said loudly, ensuring her words carried. "She is fine. It is just a dress. Not everyone is used to wearing something expensive, I suppose." The guests visibly flinched at the sheer, gratuitous cruelty in her tone. It was so unnecessary, so vicious, the kind of insult only someone completely secure in her protection would dare to use. Marcus finally placed a restraining hand on Olivia's arm. "Olivia, please." But it was clear he meant the correction only because the guests were staring, not because he genuinely disapproved of the sentiment. Evelyn drew a slow, shuddering breath. The stain continued its dark growth, a dark crimson reminder of what she had been reduced to in this household. A target, a public joke, a convenient piece of background furniture placed there while Marcus and Olivia took center stage, basking in their own manufactured drama. Her aunt squeezed her arm gently again. "Come with me, darling. Now." Evelyn nodded faintly, afraid to trust her voice yet. She took a single, unsteady step, but before she could retreat, her cousin Caleb, a quiet man who rarely attended these ostentatious gatherings, stepped directly in front of her. He looked at her with genuine, unfeigned worry. "Evelyn, are you truly all right?" The simple, honest question nearly broke her composure. Genuine concern felt utterly foreign. She opened her mouth to reply, but nothing came out. Caleb glared pointedly at Marcus across the suddenly smaller circle. "You allowed this to happen?" Marcus visibly bristled. "I said aloud it was an accident. She is overreacting. Everyone is making this far bigger than it needs to be." Caleb shook his head slowly, refusing the lie. "You know exactly what happened. We all saw it." Olivia scoffed and crossed her arms, adopting a stance of bored impatience. "Are we really doing this? Evelyn is always so dramatic." Evelyn felt every eye turn to her again, waiting for her reaction, waiting to see whether she would silently accept this triple layer of humiliation or finally break under the crushing pressure. Her legs trembled faintly, but she forced herself to remain upright. Caleb placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding. "You do not have to stand here and endure this." The guests began whispering louder. Someone near the grand piano muttered, "He is defending her. Good. She desperately needs it." Another responded quietly, "But Marcus will absolutely hate that." Marcus ran a frustrated hand through his meticulously styled hair. "Evelyn, please stop drawing attention. This is embarrassing." Evelyn finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost painfully low, but perfectly controlled. "I am not the one who made a scene." The words were simple, quiet, yet they sliced through the thick, charged air of the room with perfect, undeniable clarity. Several guests gasped again, this time at her defiance. Olivia's confident smile faltered for the first time. Evelyn turned away from them all. She held her ruined dress close to her body, as if gathering the last vestiges of her dignity. The room felt colder somehow. The chandelier lights seemed harsher, more revealing. Her aunt placed a supporting arm around her shoulder. Caleb stepped firmly beside her, creating a physical shield against further scrutiny. Together, they began to guide her away from the disaster unfolding in the center of the ballroom. But everyone present knew that something far bigger was coming. The silence felt like the thick, oppressive hush before a catastrophic storm. Evelyn followed her aunt and cousin along the edge of the ballroom, focusing intensely on steadying her ragged breath, while the hateful whispers continued to rustle and pursue her from behind. Each step felt heavy, as if the wine soaking her dress carried the crushing weight of every judgmental eye in the room. She wished the walk to the private side corridor would feel shorter. But in a mansion this vast and ostentatious, nothing ever happened quickly enough. The polished marble stretched endlessly under the soft yellow wall sconces, reflecting the dark red stain on her gown. a visible accusation that stubbornly refused to fade. Her aunt whispered reassuringly, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "It is all right, sweetheart. We will get you cleaned up. Do not listen to a word they say." Caleb walked stiffly on her other side. His lips pressed into a hard, unforgiving line. He kept glancing back over his shoulder, ready to confront anyone who dared to approach her again. His sudden, steadfast presence felt like a protective shield she hadn't known she desperately needed until this humiliating moment. But Evelyn knew the scene behind her was far from over. The whispers would not simply stop. They would follow her, stick to her skin, haunt her long after the night finally ended. She felt it in the way some relatives avoided her gaze, in the way the service staff looked away, unsure whether offering assistance would incur Marcus's wrath. The raw humiliation clung to her as surely as the wine clung to her dress. When they finally reached the quieter, deserted hallway, Evelyn leaned gently against the cool wall and exhaled, a long, shaky release of air. Her aunt produced a small, embroidered napkin from her evening bag and carefully dabbed at the stained fabric, but it only managed to spread the color slightly, making the edges fuzzy. She let out a small, sad sigh. "It will not come out tonight, dear. I am so sorry." Evelyn shook her head wearily. "It is fine. Thank you truly for helping me." Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice so only the three of them could hear the intensity of his conviction. "Evelyn, this is absolutely not your fault. Everyone saw what she did plainly." Evelyn met his eyes, a deep weariness settling over her. "Marcus will not admit it." Her voice trembled slightly, but she forced it steady. "He will defend her. He always does." Caleb frowned deeply, his jaw flexing. He should be defending his wife, not his mistress. The word struck Evelyn like a hard stone. Mistress. She hated that it applied so easily and now so publicly. She had known about Olivia quietly, painfully, in the suffocating privacy of her heart. But hearing the word spoken aloud by a family member made the ugly truth more solid, more real than she had ever allowed herself to admit. Her aunt glanced anxiously over her shoulder to ensure no one was approaching their private crisis. "This cannot continue, Evelyn. Marcus has lost all sense of decency and responsibility." Evelyn desperately wanted to agree, wanted to voice the truth she had meticulously buried inside for too long. But before she could answer, heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. The rhythm was utterly unmistakable. Marcus's stride, heavy, impatient. His expensive shoes tapping the marble with the entitled confidence of a man who still believed he owned every single space he walked through. He reached them, with Olivia trailing just behind him, her eyes gleaming with cold amusement, her walk as casual and unconcerned as if she hadn't just orchestrated a major scandal that silenced an entire ballroom. "There you are," Marcus said, his voice sharp with irritation and accusation. "You walked off and created an even bigger spectacle than necessary." Caleb instantly stepped in front of Evelyn, placing his body between them. "She walked off because you allowed someone to publicly humiliate her." Marcus scoffed and theatrically brushed imaginary dust from his custom jacket sleeve. "Do not exaggerate, Caleb. It was wine. It will dry." Olivia laughed softly behind him, confirming his statement. "He is right. Evelyn always takes things too seriously." Evelyn closed her eyes for a fleeting moment, gathering a reserve of cold strength. "You poured the wine on me deliberately." Olivia widened her eyes in exaggerated, dramatic shock. "Me? Deliberately?" She giggled. "Oh, Evelyn. You really should be careful with baseless accusations like that." Caleb narrowed his gaze, his patience snapping. "We all saw it, Olivia." Olivia's smug smile did not waver. "You saw what you wanted to see, Caleb." Marcus rolled his shoulders, sighing loudly, signaling the end of his patience. "Enough." Evelyn apologized to Olivia for suggesting she did something like that on purpose. Evelyn stared at him, certain she had misheard the chilling instruction. "You want me to apologize?" "Yes," Marcus replied without the slightest hesitation. Before this gets blown out of proportion and embarrasses the family even more than it already has. There it was, the brutal sentence that revealed his entire priority structure. Not the truth, not loyalty to his marriage, not fairness. Only the cold, absolute preservation of the Montgomery name, the spotless reputation he believed Evelyn could ruin simply by existing outside the confines of his absolute control. Her aunt gasped softly, audibly. "Marcus, that is absolutely unacceptable." He turned to Alara with a cold, dismissive expression. "This is between me and my wife. Please stay out of it." Caleb stepped forward again, jaw clenched and furious. "You do not get to speak to her like that." Marcus squared his shoulders, ready for the confrontation. "Do not lecture me on how to handle my marriage, Caleb. Evelyn knows her role. Asterisk her role. Asterisk the word landed like a physical blow, tightening a knot of years of suppressed emotion in Evelyn's chest. A brutal reminder of her designated existence as his silent, obedient appendage. A wife molded entirely to his convenience. A background character in her own life story. She looked directly at him, her gaze steadier than she felt. "My role is not to let your mistress humiliate me in front of your entire family." Olivia's fake, brittle smile finally cracked, replaced by a flash of genuine anger. "Watch your tone." Caleb raised a restraining hand toward Olivia. "You should watch yours." Marcus stepped forcefully between them, his voice sharpened with mounting fury. "Caleb, this is not your business. You have always been jealous of me. Everyone knows it." Caleb blinked, momentarily stunned by the ludicrous accusation, then laughed humorlessly, a rough, rasping sound. "Jealous? Of you, Marcus? You have completely lost your mind." Olivia folded her arms and leaned smugly into Marcus's side. "Let us not waste any more time on this. She has already embarrassed herself enough. Let us return to the party." Evelyn's aunt spoke with quiet, unwavering firmness. "The only embarrassment here is your behavior, Marcus." He ignored her completely, speaking only to Evelyn. "Apologize, Evelyn. Then change your dress. We still have speeches tonight." Evelyn stared at him. The hallway seemed to dim around the edges, focusing all the light on his arrogant, demanding face. She heard the distant music starting up again, but it no longer softened anything. It only served as a constant reminder that the world expected her to fix this scene quickly so Marcus could continue his carefully curated performance of a perfect family gathering. She straightened her back, consciously lifting her chin. Her hands trembled, but she did not try to hide it. "I will not apologize," she said. Marcus's eyes widened slightly in genuine shock. Olivia stiffened beside him. Caleb let out a silent sigh of relief. Her aunt squeezed Evelyn's hand fiercely. Marcus leaned in close, his voice dropping to a low, cold threat. "You are making a grave mistake, Evelyn." Evelyn did not look away, meeting his threat with quiet resolve. "The only mistake tonight was letting her treat me like this for so long." For the first time, a ripple of genuine uncertainty passed over Marcus's face. It was brief, but Evelyn saw it clearly. The total control he believed he possessed was slipping. Olivia scoffed, trying to reassert dominance. "Please, she is just being dramatic again." Caleb stepped closer to Evelyn, his voice ringing with conviction. "You are not dramatic. You are finally standing up for yourself." The hallway filled with a different kind of tension now. Not the oppressive weight of humiliation or fear, but something stronger, something braver. The balance of power was palpably shifting, and everyone could feel it. The tension in the quiet hallway grew heavier with every passing second, becoming almost suffocating. It felt as if the walls themselves were physically pressing inward, forcing every painful truth that had been studiously ignored for months out into the open air. The soft, elegant music drifting from the distant ballroom no longer sounded inviting. It sounded remote and hollow, as though it belonged to an entirely different timeline. A night where humiliation had not yet struck, and loyalties had not been so brutally tested. Caleb remained steadfastly beside Evelyn, his firm stance telling Marcus unequivocally that he would not retreat. Her aunt stood protectively on her other side, her lips trembling slightly with a mixture of both profound anger and deep worry. Olivia's heels clicked sharply as she shifted her weight, the sound echoing down the hallway like tiny, impatient snaps. Marcus looked at Evelyn with a look of simmering, aggressive frustration. He seemed poised, ready to seize control of the volatile situation through sheer force and intimidation. "Evelyn, you are not helping yourself," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. "Apologize so we can return to the event. Everyone is watching this circus." She met his eyes, utterly without flinching. "Everyone saw what The text ends abruptly here. Did." Olivia's laughter was a brittle, low sound, entirely devoid of warmth. "You poor, pathetic thing." Still clutching that delusion. Caleb spun, his body language taut with genuine anger. "It is not a delusion. It was intentional. Your hand moved with calculated malice. You poured that wine specifically to wound her." Olivia just offered a cruel, painted smirk. "Convince yourself however you need to justify your obsession." Marcus slammed his palm against the wall, the sound echoing sharply. "Enough. I am terminating this spectacle." His voice, though slightly raised, was enough to make the distant, elegant murmurs in the ballroom falter. Guests were already shifting in their seats, sensing the toxic energy emanating from the corridor. Even from the hallway, Evelyn could hear the subtle, collective shift. People were listening intently. Guests were slowly turning their heads toward the corridor, sensing that something genuinely explosive was building right in the heart of the mansion. Evelyn tried desperately to melt back into the shadows, but Marcus's imposing frame blocked any retreat. He advanced on her, his gaze fixated not on her face, but on the dripping crimson stain. "Look at you, Evelyn. You have allowed a trivial spill to ruin the entire evening. Why can you never manage to behave appropriately?" Her aunt drew a sharp, audible breath. "Marcus, that is an unspeakable thing to say." He sliced his hand dismissively through the air, ignoring her completely. "You exist only to make things difficult. I am utterly exhausted by your ineptitude." Evelyn's pulse hammered a painful rhythm against her throat. The familiar, suffocating weight of humiliation descended, but this time, it was met by a nascent, rebellious flicker, a deep, long-ignored fire stirring beneath the surface. "You do not get to speak to her in that manner." Caleb's voice cut through the tension like glass. Marcus spun on him, his fury redirected. "Stay out of this. I am handling my wife." Handling. The word was a heavy, sickening blow, staining her skin worse than the wine ever could. Marcus constantly used those words, handling, managing, fixing, as though she were an operational defect, a broken machine to be corrected. Never a partner. Never a person. Before she could process the offense, a young waiter practically sprinted down the hallway, face ashen and slick with sweat. He clutched his phone awkwardly, trying to conceal the glowing screen against his chest. Olivia instantly went defensive. "What are you doing back here? Get back to your post and serve the guests." But the young man hesitated, his terror obvious. His eyes darted nervously between Evelyn's soaked dress and Marcus's imposing figure. "Sir, I think you need to understand." Guests in the ballroom recorded the incident. The wine, the comments, it's already being circulated. Marcus's face instantly leached of all color. "What do you mean, circulated?" The waiter swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Several guests uploaded it immediately. The sound is completely clear. The microphones used by the band picked up every word, sir." A genuine shiver of panic, like a sudden gust of icy wind, swept through the claustrophobic hallway. Olivia reacted with predatory speed. "Give me that device now." But the waiter recoiled, stepping back against the wall. "I can't, ma'am. Several people are recording it. I saw at least 4 different angles circulating." Evelyn blinked, stunned. She had been so focused on the immediate shame that she hadn't realized the sophisticated microphones from the dance band had captured the confrontation so sharply. The ballroom had been filled with music, Yet the momentary silence around the wine splash must have made every excruciating detail painfully crisp. Marcus ran a hand roughly through his hair. This is completely absurd. They had no legal right to record us. I did not give my permission for this. Caleb, his arms crossed tightly, offered a cold rebuttal. You don't get to demand it be erased. Olivia scoffed, desperation creeping into her tone. It is a private, family event. We will command them to delete the footage. The waiter shook his head rapidly. People have already left the room to make urgent calls. I believe reporters may have already been tipped off. A fresh, chilling silence slammed into the group. Reporters. In the insulated, high-stakes world of the Montgomerys, that single word carried the threat of catastrophic ruin. Public shame, devastating company scandals, investment backlash. Everything Marcus held sacred. He lunged toward the waiter. You will hand me that phone this instant. The young man merely stood his ground, shaking his head. I'm sorry, sir. Others possess the footage too. Marcus clenched his fists, forcing himself to keep his hands firmly at his sides. He couldn't be seen physically threatening staff. Not now, when every eye was trained on him. Olivia tried desperately to regain control of the moment. Fine. We will go back into the ballroom and smooth things over. We will tell them it was a complete misunderstanding. Evelyn simply tripped and bumped into me. Caleb stepped forward, his expression severe. That lie will not hold up. Marcus narrowed his gaze, his arrogance returning in a desperate wave. It does not matter if it holds. What matters is that the narrative remains clean. Evelyn could not believe what she was hearing, the sheer prioritizing of optics over reality. You care more about a narrative than what really happened? Marcus turned slowly to face her, his eyes devoid of any warmth. Yes, because narratives shape reputations, and reputations shape power, something you have consistently proven incapable of understanding. Her aunt let out a soft cry of disbelief. Marcus, she is your wife. But Marcus did not spare his aunt a glance. He focused entirely on Evelyn, his voice laced with cold accusation. If you had only behaved properly, none of this entire fiasco would have happened. The words stung her soul far more violently than the wine had stung her skin. Olivia slipped her arm possessively around Marcus. Come on, darling, let us return and fix this. We can simply tell everyone she misunderstood. The video already clearly shows what happened, Caleb insisted. You cannot rewrite it. Marcus glared, his face menacing. Watch me. He reached for Evelyn's arm, intending to drag her back into the blinding light of the ballroom and force a humiliating, public apology. But Caleb intercepted the move instantly. He grabbed Marcus's wrist in an iron vice grip, stopping him mid-movement. Evelyn froze entirely. Olivia let out a strangled gasp, and the aunt covered her mouth in horror. Marcus's face darkened, veins standing out on his neck. Let go. Caleb refused, his posture rigid. You have gone too far. Evelyn's chest felt like it was encased in ice. Caleb's grip was steady, his expression completely unwavering. The fragile veneer that had held the evening together finally, audibly snapped. Every person in the ballroom was now clustered near the entrance. They had seen the attempt to drag Evelyn away. They had definitely heard the shouts. Phones were immediately raised again, creating a horrifying, reflective semicircle of glass lenses. A physical wall of witnesses now stood mere steps away. The evidence was no longer hidden in a private exchange. It was public, and Marcus had absolutely nowhere left to hide. The crowd at the ballroom entrance swelled rapidly, growing thicker by the second. Faces pushed forward with a mixture of shocked disbelief and genuine concern. The soft, elegant glow of the chandeliers cast long, strange reflections across dozens of screens held high. The quiet, previous hum of the music was completely obliterated, replaced by the tense murmur of people trying to grasp how a private family gathering had spiraled into a high-stakes public spectacle. Caleb maintained his unyielding, firm grip on Marcus's wrist. His jaw was set tight, his shoulders aggressively squared. He would not permit Marcus to physically touch Evelyn again. Marcus glared back, his rage visibly escalating. But something in Caleb's immovable posture prevented him from lashing out further. Olivia moved behind Marcus, hissing furiously into his ear. "Do something. They are all watching." But Marcus knew, with crushing certainty, that he was utterly cornered. The witnesses, the phones, the captured audio. Every single move he made would echo far beyond the walls of the mansion. Evelyn stood utterly motionless, breathing in shallow, uneven gasps. She felt profoundly disconnected, as though her body no longer belonged to her. The ruined silk clung cold and heavy against her skin, the wine stain seeming impossibly brighter under the harsh lights. Her deepest instinct was to retreat, to vanish into the shadows. Yet she found herself trapped, the unwilling, shivering epicenter of a storm she had never solicited. Her aunt gently tugged at her hand. "Stay with me, dear. I am right here." The soft tremor in the older woman's voice betrayed her deep-seated fear of Marcus's next move. A voice suddenly pierced the tension from the crowd. "Someone call for assistance." Another followed quickly. "Get the staff. This has gone too far." A third voice, firm and practical, declared, "She needs medical attention. That level of stress is extremely dangerous." Evelyn looked up, startled and profoundly confused. She hadn't even realized her hands were shaking violently, her fingers numb, her breathing frighteningly rapid. The toxic cocktail of humiliation and fear had twisted inside her until her entire body felt weak and unstable. A middle-aged guest, moving with professional authority, stepped directly between Marcus and Evelyn. "Step back," he told Marcus without emotion. "You are not touching her again." Marcus scoffed contemptuously. "You have absolutely no right to intervene." The man's reply was calm but absolute. "She is visibly distressed." His expression hardened further. "And this has ceased to be a private argument." Several other guests nodded, a heavy wave of collective judgment washing over the room. Marcus, stripped of his usual aura of untouchable power, suddenly looked smaller, less formidable, less deserving of the automatic respect he usually commanded. The mansion's official security guard, a tall man with broad shoulders and a reassuringly calm demeanor, arrived immediately. He scanned the scene. The crowd, Evelyn's stained dress, Marcus's coiled rage. "Sir," the guard said carefully, maintaining strict professionalism, "I have been asked to verify the situation." Olivia lunged forward before Marcus could compose himself. "She is perfectly fine," she snapped. "This is being dramatically overblown." But the guard deliberately kept his gaze fixed on Marcus. "Is there anything occurring here that necessitates staff intervention?" Caleb finally released Marcus's wrist, only doing so when the guard was firmly positioned between the two men. Evelyn exhaled in a shaky, deep rush. Her aunt wrapped a protective arm around her shoulders, gently pulling her slightly behind the massive frame of the guard. "Someone bring ice or cold towels," a voice requested from the crowd. A young woman immediately rushed forward, offering a neatly folded cloth with intensely kind eyes. "Place this on your chest," she murmured softly. "Your breathing looks constricted. It might help." Evelyn accepted the cloth with trembling fingers. The immediate coolness against her skin provided a sliver of relief. Not enough to calm her entirely, but enough to register that she was not standing completely alone. More guests formed a close, protective circle around her. People she barely knew, people who had watched her from a distance for years, people who had never dared to speak up before. But tonight, they were deliberately standing between her and the two people who had just publicly humiliated her. Marcus looked around, his rising panic evident. He could feel the fundamental shift. The presumed loyalty he had always taken for granted was disintegrating. The power he thought he commanded was dissolving before his very eyes. He threw his hands up in a gesture of frustrated innocence. "Stop acting like I hurt her. It was a simple misunderstanding." A woman across the room shouted back. "We saw you grab her arm," another added. "We saw your mistress pour the wine." A third voice echoed, unforgiving. "This behavior is utterly unacceptable." Olivia's strained smile finally fractured. Everyone is being ridiculous and melodramatic. This family is always so judgmental. But no one was listening. The room had irrevocably chosen a side, and it was not hers. The guard spoke with quiet authority. "Sir, you must step away for the moment. I will escort Mrs. Montgomery to a quieter room to ensure her safety and privacy." Marcus's eyes widened with genuine alarm. "She does not need to be escorted anywhere." Caleb moved closer again, his presence a challenge. "She absolutely does." Evelyn swallowed hard, forcing her voice to stay level. "I can walk. Please let us not escalate this further." Her aunt looked at her, deeply worried. "You are shaking, dear. Let's just get you somewhere peaceful." The guard nodded. "I will take her to the private lounge. It is quiet and completely isolated from the crowd." Evelyn hesitated. She loathed the idea of retreating, of seeming weak in the face of Marcus and Olivia's cruelty. Yet the frantic thudding in her chest screamed that she needed a moment of sanctuary before she utterly collapsed. She nodded quietly. "All right." As she moved forward, several guests spontaneously formed a human, protective path. Phones lowered, faces softened. Even those who had judged her silently for years now carried guilt in their eyes. They had watched in silence for too long. Marcus made one final, desperate attempt to reach for her. "Evelyn, do not dare walk away from me." But the guard stepped swiftly between them again. "Please let her go." Evelyn did not turn back. She refused to look at Marcus or Olivia. She walked toward the lounge with her aunt and Caleb flanking her. Every step felt fragile, yet profoundly significant, the fragile beginning of something new, something stronger. Behind her, the murmurs escalated again. The crowd was no longer simply whispering about a juicy scandal. They were whispering about consequences, accountability, and irrefutable evidence. As the guard opened the heavy door to the private lounge, Evelyn stepped across the threshold. In that single instant, she registered a profound truth. This was, impossibly, the very first moment tonight that she had felt truly safe. The private lounge door clicked softly shut behind Evelyn, but the suffocating tension in the hallway only intensified. Inside the ballroom, the cluster of guests near the entrance slowly began to drift back toward the center of the room, though the earlier atmosphere of careless festivity was entirely shattered. The elegant music resumed, yet it sounded terribly wrong now. Forced, uneven. A thin acoustic veil trying poorly to conceal a massive, widening crack. Marcus remained rigidly frozen near the hallway entrance, his every muscle devoted to the hopeless task of regaining control of a situation that had already escaped him. His jaw was clenched so tightly that the muscle along the side of his face pulsed visibly. Olivia stood close beside him, arms tightly crossed, her eyes darting nervously between the staring guests. Her earlier smug, assured confidence had entirely evaporated. Replaced by a raw flicker of fear, she desperately tried to conceal behind a strained, pathetic smile. But the crowd no longer bothered to pretend they weren't staring. Conversations now shifted into openly critical commentary. "I absolutely cannot believe he acted like that," one woman whispered, loud enough to carry across the room. Another replied, "It was outrageous. And the entire thing is documented on video." A man standing near the piano added smugly, "It's already online. Look at this." He raised his phone screen, which glowed accusingly. The people closest to him leaned in. The short video clip's audio was agonizingly clear. Olivia's contemptuous voice, the unmistakable splash of wine, Marcus's harsh, demanding tone as he insisted Evelyn apologize. Everything that had been sheltered behind their wealth and elevated status was now brutally exposed for strangers to judge. Olivia sputtered, "What are they showing? Give me that phone." But the man pulled it away, his movement calm and definitive. "Do not touch me." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, visibly distressed. "This cannot be happening." "Well, it is." Someone near the buffet table responded flatly. The pianist stopped playing again, his hands hovering nervously over the keys. He glanced toward the door as if seeking immediate permission to flee the disaster. Cousins who usually heaped adoration upon Marcus now whispered among themselves with blatant disgust. Family friends who once boasted of their association with the Montgomery family looked intensely uncomfortable, shifting their weight and avoiding eye contact. A few immediately spoke into their phones, forwarding the damning video. Then, a familiar, formidable figure strode through the crowd. Ms. Hale, the longtime, sharp-edged corporate attorney who handled many of the Montgomery business affairs. She was tall, impeccably poised, and renowned for an expression that always seemed to predict disaster before it materialized. Tonight, her face confirmed that disaster had not just arrived. It had conquered. She approached Marcus with slow, deliberate steps. "Do you grasp the gravity and severity of this incident?" she asked quietly, yet loud enough for surrounding guests to hear every syllable. Marcus rubbed his temples feverishly. "It's being outrageously overblown." Ms. Hale did not flinch. "No, Marcus. The audio is damning. The video is worse. And this room is full of highly influential people. This will not simply disappear." Olivia grabbed Marcus's arm desperately. "Tell her to fix this. Tell her to delete it." Ms. Hale spoke without even granting Olivia a glance. "I am not your attorney, madam." She turned back to Marcus, her tone chilling. "And legally speaking, she is the liability." Olivia recoiled, furious. "Excuse me." Ms. Hale raised a sharp, silencing hand. "Do not speak." Several guests watched the exchange with open, avid fascination. This was no longer merely a family squabble. It was the visible beginning of a financial and legal unraveling. Marcus tried to smooth his jacket, but his hands betrayed him, shaking visibly. "I will handle this," he insisted weakly. Ms. Hale shook her head firmly. "No, you will not, because every minute you waste stalling is another minute of footage being aggressively shared online." She motioned toward the far end of the ballroom. "Look." Marcus followed her gaze. A group of the younger guests stood clustered in a tight circle, phones raised high. They were filming again, this time broadcasting the accelerating chaos. One of Marcus's uncles, red-faced and trembling with indignation, stepped forward. "You have disgraced this family name." Olivia positioned herself protectively in front of Marcus. "Stop blaming him. You are all behaving ridiculously. It was just a little wine." A collective gasp of disbelief rose from the crowd. The uncle stared at Olivia as if she had physically struck him. "Just a little wine?" he repeated, his voice heavy with condemnation. "And just a little public cruelty. And just a little attempt to physically drag your wife back by the arm. Is that your standard of acceptable behavior?" Olivia opened her mouth to argue, but his raised hand silenced her instantly. Another family member, Aunt Vivian, approached and thrust her phone screen toward Marcus. "This clip already has 60,000 views." Marcus paled drastically. "Impossible. It was posted 10 minutes ago," Vivian confirmed. "People are already tagging major journalists." Olivia snatched the phone from her hand. "Show me." But the instantaneous, brutal comments hit her harder than any physical blow. Disgraceful. Poor woman. She deserves so much better. Classic cheating husband behavior. Arrogant mistress thinks she owns the place. Family money does not excuse abuse. Olivia's lips trembled violently. "This is twisted. People are lying." Vivian snatched her phone back fiercely. "The truth, Olivia, is right there on video." Marcus staggered back as if physically assaulted. His eyes darted desperately across the room. Every single gaze felt like an accusation. Every whispered comment felt like a threat. His meticulously built reputation, his polished image as the heir to the Montgomery legacy, all of it teetered precariously on a single collapsing edge. The mansion's head of staff, Mr. Bell, hurried back to the ballroom. His voice resonated across the large space. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must ask you to please return to your tables." But no one moved. Instead, they watched him, anticipating that his next announcement would be a formal verdict. Mr. Bell lowered his voice when he reached Marcus. "Sir, several guests have officially requested formal statements. There is serious concern regarding safety and liability." Marcus went utterly white. Liability. Mr. Bell nodded gravely. They are asking if they should contact law enforcement. Olivia gasped, horrified. What? No. A younger woman in the crowd spoke firmly. It would be the responsible thing to do. She was terrified and humiliated, and he tried to assault her. Someone else added, this legally qualifies as public harassment. Another voice joined in, and filmed harassment. Marcus looked around the ballroom. Everywhere he turned, he found only accusation, judgment, and phones raised like mirrored, irrefutable evidence. He tried to steady his voice. Everyone is simply overreacting. A man in an expensive suit stepped forward. The only overreaction came from you, sir, and your mistress. Olivia flushed a deep scarlet. Marcus grabbed her arm. We are leaving now. But Ms. Hale blocked his path instantly. You are not going anywhere, Marcus. You need to stay until this matter is formally addressed. Running now will only ensure your absolute ruin. Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound escaped. The storm had broken directly over him, and there was no possible shelter left. The private lounge felt blessedly quiet, quiet enough for her to hear the frantic rhythm of her own heartbeat slowly begin to decelerate. Evelyn sat on a plush velvet chair near a low, polished table, her hands clasped tightly together in her lap. The soft, diffuse lighting made the room infinitely warmer than the glare of the ballroom. Yet she couldn't shake the deep cold that had settled in her chest. Her ruined gown clung uncomfortably to her skin. The dried wine left faint, sticky streaks along her arms. She inhaled deeply, trying to stop the pronounced trembling in her fingers. Her aunt paced softly nearby, watchful. Caleb stood sentinel by the door, arms folded, listening intently for any disturbance from outside. He kept glancing back at Evelyn, his worry unconcealed. He had seen the way the crowd turned. He had seen the panic creeping into Marcus's eyes. He knew the storm was not over, only transferred. Do you want water, dear? Her aunt asked gently. Evelyn shook her head. Not yet. She needed this suspended moment to fully understand the strange, quiet new emotion rising inside her. It wasn't the paralyzing fear that had propelled her into the lounge, nor was it the raw, hot humiliation that had drenched her like the wine. It was something deeper, quieter, and fundamentally stronger. A voice she had harshly suppressed for years, whispering the irrefutable truth. She did not deserve any of this. Not the insults, not the casual dismissal, not the profound cruelty disguised as partnership. The door opened slightly, causing Caleb to instantly tense, ready to repel any intruder. But it was only Mr. Bell, the head of staff. He bowed respectfully. Mrs. Montgomery, the situation outside is significantly escalating. Evelyn straightened slightly in her seat. How? Many guests are vehemently demanding answers, Mr. Bell explained. Some wish to speak with you directly. Some are waiting for your husband to publicly address the incident. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Others are explicitly asking to contact law enforcement. Her aunt gasped audibly. Authorities? Good heavens. Caleb nodded grimly. They should. This is not something that can or should be ignored any longer. Evelyn looked down at her stained dress once more. The dark red mark had dried stiffly against the light silk. The color made her stomach turn over. For years, she had swallowed every insult quietly. For years, she had genuinely believed that preserving a fragile peace was preferable to speaking an uncomfortable truth. But tonight, the entire world had seen everything. Tonight, she could not hide behind silence even if she wanted to. She reached out and touched the sticky edge of the stain with her fingertip, and then she whispered, the sound barely audible, Enough. Her aunt leaned closer. Dear, what did you say? Evelyn lifted her head, and her voice emerged steadier and clearer than she thought possible. I said, enough. Caleb's intense expression softened into an approving look. Good. Mr. Bell looked visibly relieved. Mrs. Montgomery, the family is currently gathering in the hallway. They are demanding that your husband come forward and explain himself. Evelyn let out a slow, deliberate breath. He won't. Caleb finished the thought, his voice laced with certainty. No, he will not. Try to twist it. And blame you, her aunt added, the exhaustion in her voice echoing years of similar battles. Evelyn simply nodded. He always does. But as she spoke, an extraordinary transformation took place in her physical being. Her spine straightened, defying the weight of the evening's events. She sat noticeably taller now, lifting her shoulders with a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed. She pressed the heels of her palms firmly against her knees, an act of grounding that drew the tension from her core. The debilitating trembling that had threatened to consume her finally stopped. A strange, powerful calm washed through her. Not resignation, which was what Marcus expected, and certainly not the cowardly retreat he desired. This was something forged in fire, something closer to unyielding resolve. Bring me a shawl or something clean, she said, her voice low but steady, carrying the weight of a quiet command. Her aunt, witnessing this unexpected steal, hurried immediately to the elegant coat rack by the door and retrieved a pale, intricately embroidered shawl. She wrapped the soft fabric around Evelyn's shoulders, carefully maneuvering the material to avoid brushing against the large, unsightly wine stain on the front of the ruined dress. The cool, gentle wool offered comfort against Evelyn's skin, a small cocoon of normalcy in the chaos. Mr. Bell, the head of staff, stepped deferentially closer. Mrs. Montgomery, do you wish to address the guests? If you do not, I can escort you discreetly through a side exit, assuring privacy. No, Evelyn stated, the single word ringing with finality. I will not leave. The thought crystallized in her mind. Marcus wanted to silence me. Olivia wanted to humiliate me and ensure my erasure. I will not disappear and allow them to speak for me, to rewrite the truth in the immediate aftermath of their cruelty. Her aunt blinked, startled by this fierce refusal. Evelyn, are you absolutely sure? Yes, she said simply. And she was. The lounge door creaked open again, signaling a new arrival. This time it was Marcus. His face was a mask of panic, flushed crimson with fear, not anger. Olivia followed right behind him, clutching her expensive phone with hands that betrayed her own profound anxiety. Both of them froze instantly when they took in the sight of Evelyn. Standing upright, perfectly composed, her posture radiating strength despite the wet, stained silk of her gown. Marcus visibly exhaled in a gust of profound, selfish relief. Thank God. Evelyn, we need to talk right now. Caleb stepped between them instantly, a protective barrier of controlled fury. No, you do not get to pressure her again. Marcus glared at him, his panic turning sharp. Stay out of this, Caleb. I will not, Caleb replied calmly, his eyes unblinking. Olivia, desperation overriding her usual calculated veneer, pointed an accusatory finger at Evelyn. You need to come out there and tell the guests you misunderstood what happened. You need to fix this. Evelyn raised one perfectly arched eyebrow, the gesture conveying absolute skepticism. Misunderstood? Yes, Olivia insisted, her voice tight with frayed nerves. You tripped. The glass slipped. You made it look intentional. You manipulated the situation to seem like a deliberate attack. Evelyn stared at her rival, genuine disbelief washing away any lingering doubt. I did not make anything look intentional. You did that all on your own, Olivia. Your actions speak for themselves. Olivia's jaw tightened, grinding her teeth. If you do not clear this up immediately, reporters will get involved. Marcus's company will suffer catastrophic damage. His reputation will be destroyed. You will be responsible for destroying everything we have built. Evelyn's voice was cool, deceptively soft, almost humorous in its delivery. That is exactly what Marcus always said. Isn't it? That I would be responsible for everything. Marcus looked at his wife with a strange, oily smile, a desperate attempt to charm his way back into control. Evelyn, please do not do this. You know how important tonight is for the board, for our future. Yes, she replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. Tonight is important, because tonight I realize something essential. Marcus leaned forward, trying to seize the opening. And what is that? Evelyn inhaled deeply, drawing strength into her lungs. Her voice came out strong, unwavering, the truth undeniable. I realized I have been afraid of the wrong thing. Marcus blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. What exactly does that mean? It means, Evelyn said, her eyes fixed solely on him. I have been afraid of upsetting you, afraid of embarrassing you, afraid of making noise. But tonight, I saw the truth, the glaring, ugly truth. You were never protecting me, Marcus. You were only ever protecting your image. Marcus instinctively stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Evelyn, be reasonable. We can still handle this privately. She stepped back slightly, a move made not out of fear, but out of absolute perfect clarity. No, I am finally being reasonable. Olivia scoffed, recovering her belligerence. Do not pretend you have power here, Evelyn. You're still just the meek little wife. Evelyn turned her head sharply toward the mistress, her gaze like ice. I am not pretending anything. The small room went completely still. Marcus looked utterly confused, the script he knew suddenly thrown away. Olivia looked irritated, but a sliver of fear finally entered her eyes. Caleb and Evelyn's aunt exchanged quick, hopeful glances. This was the moment they had been praying for. Evelyn continued, her voice gaining momentum. You wanted me silent. You wanted me small and invisible, a piece of background furniture in your life, but that ends now. Olivia rolled her eyes with dismissive theatricality. Oh, spare us the dramatic speech, Evelyn. You're stained with wine and attempting a coup. Evelyn looked at her without flinching, noting the smear of panic behind Olivia's arrogance. You poured wine on me in front of a room full of witnesses. You mocked me mercilessly. You tried to tear me down publicly, and you enjoyed every single second of it. Olivia's forced color paled dramatically. And Marcus, Evelyn added, turning back to her husband, her voice now heavy with accusation, you let her. You encouraged her. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat dry. Evelyn, please. This is not the time. No, Evelyn said firmly, cutting him off. You do not get to tell me what to do anymore. Her aunt placed a trembling hand over her heart, overwhelmed with a surge of protective pride. Caleb nodded vigorously, approving the resolute strength in Evelyn's voice. Marcus stepped forward, his face etched with genuine, naked desperation. Where are you going? Evelyn held her head high, ready to speak the truth in the presence of everyone who needed to hear it. And for the first time in years, she felt steady, not broken, not hidden away in a shadow, but exactly where she needed to be, on the edge of reclaiming everything that had been cruelly taken from her. The hallway outside the lounge had grown noticeably louder, the air thick with anticipation. Voices rose and fell in tense, inquisitive waves. Guests crowded closer to the door, forming a dense semicircle, waiting for someone, anyone, to take control of the mounting chaos. The atmosphere felt charged, almost electrically unstable, as if the grand mansion itself sensed that an irreparable line had finally been crossed. Caleb opened the lounge door just a crack and peered out into the throng. They are all gathered, he whispered back to Evelyn. Everyone is waiting for a statement from someone. Evelyn adjusted the embroidered shawl around her shoulders, settling the soft fabric. Then it is time. Her aunt squeezed Evelyn's hand gently, a quiet pledge of solidarity. We are right here with you, dear. Evelyn nodded. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but it no longer felt like the frantic beat of fear. It felt like a drum, steady and relentless, calling her forward into the light. Marcus stepped forward quickly, seizing her arm. Evelyn, wait. Do not go out there. Let me talk to the guests first. I will smooth things over. No, she said simply, pulling her arm free. You have talked enough for one night. Olivia scoffed from behind him, her voice dripping with malice. What is she going to do? Cry on stage? Evelyn looked at Olivia with calm, impenetrable resolve. Not at all. Caleb opened the heavy door fully. The group, Evelyn, Caleb, and her aunt, stepped out into the highly charged hallway. The shift in atmosphere was immediate and absolute. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Every head snapped toward the new arrivals. The dense crowd parted slowly, creating an unnervingly clear path for Evelyn as she walked forward. She felt dozens of eyes fixed on her. Some sympathetic, some purely curious, and a few, surprisingly, hopeful. Marcus and Olivia followed close behind, clearly still attempting to control the unfolding narrative. Marcus attempted a reassuring, practiced smile directed at the gathered crowd, but it failed completely. His face looked strained, desperate, and visibly shaken by the sheer speed and totality with which events had spun out of his once absolute control. Then, a voice cut through the heavy silence, silencing even the air itself. "Move aside." It was deep, commanding, and instantly recognizable to every person present. The hallway fell completely silent, the tension peaking. Richard Montgomery stepped forward from the far end of the corridor. His mere presence shifted the entire energy of the space, substituting chaos with an iron authority. Tall, impossibly dignified, and dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that seemed to absorb the light, he looked like a man carved from sheer, unyielding power. Every relative straightened their posture. Every staff member paused mid-step. Richard Montgomery was not just Marcus's father. He was the patriarch of the Montgomery Empire, a man whose word carried immutable weight in every boardroom and political circle he entered. Tonight, his eyes were colder and more dangerous than anyone had ever seen them. Evelyn froze for a moment, unsure of his intention. Was he here to save Marcus, or to clean up the mess? Marcus took a nervous step backward as his father approached with long, steady strides. "Dad," Marcus began with a forced, brittle laugh. "Thank goodness you are here. There has been a small misunderstanding that we are just clearing up." Richard did not acknowledge him in the slightest. He reached Evelyn first, pausing directly in front of her. The entire crowd held its breath, awaiting the verdict. Richard looked at her, his stern features softening subtly with an emotion that looked unsettlingly like pain. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, the concern genuine. Evelyn nodded, though her voice shook faintly when she answered. "I will be." Richard's jaw tightened visibly. He looked down at her stained gown, taking in the violent red blotches marking the fabric like fresh wounds. His eyes darkened dangerously. He turned sharply, pivoting to face his son. "What did you do?" Richard asked in a low, quiet voice that resonated through the corridor, sounding far more dangerous and menacing than any shout could have been. Marcus swallowed hard, clutching at the first available lie. "It was not me." She tripped. She bumped the glass. Olivia tried to steady her, but it was too late. The lie clung to the air like foul smoke. Richard simply stared at him, his gaze unrelenting. Then he shifted his attention to Olivia. "Is that true?" Olivia forced a bright, desperate smile, trying to recapture her composure. "Yes, Mr. Montgomery. It was a complete, unfortunate accident." She panicked and made it bigger than it was, trying to cause a scene. Richard said nothing for several agonizing seconds. The silence was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and full of terrible judgment. Then he lifted his hand. The slap cracked through the hallway like a thunderclap ripping through the sudden silence. Marcus's head snapped violently to the side, his hair flying. Gasps erupted across the corridor. Olivia stumbled backward, utterly shocked and speechless. Even Evelyn flinched at the brutal sound. It was not merely the violence of the gesture that stunned the room. It was the profound meaning behind it. Richard Montgomery was a titan of composure, a man who never once raised his voice, much less his hand, in anger or public display. Marcus stared at his father, disbelief etched onto his face, one cheek rapidly turning red. "Dad, you hit me." Richard stepped closer, not in fury, but in cold, controlled disappointment. His voice was steady as polished stone. "I disciplined you because I raised you better than to humiliate your wife in public and then stand here and spin pathetic lies about your actions." Olivia sputtered, trying to reclaim control. "This is absurd. He is not the one who embarrassed her. I did nothing wrong. She is trying to ruin his life." Richard turned his cold gaze to her. "You are not family. You do not speak." Olivia's mouth slammed shut immediately. Her face turned ghost white. Richard then gestured sweepingly toward the captive crowd. All of you saw what happened. All of you heard the recording of your wife's and her companion's deliberate actions. Do not insult my intelligence by repeating transparent lies. No one dared to move or utter a sound. Richard faced Evelyn again, his posture slightly less rigid. You should never have been treated this way. Not in this home. Not in front of my family. Evelyn's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she held steady, refusing to break. Richard lifted a thick, buff-colored folder he had been holding in his hand. No one, consumed by the shock of the confrontation, had noticed it until now. And since we are addressing the truth, he continued, his voice regaining its corporate resonance, there is something else that needs to be made perfectly clear. He held the folder up high, ensuring everyone saw it. This mansion belongs to Evelyn. A shockwave ripped through the assembled guests. Marcus choked on a silent gasp. What are you talking about? This is the family estate. Richard shook his head slowly, a gesture of deep regret. It was until your wedding day. I transferred ownership, the deed, the title, everything, to Evelyn as a wedding gift. I have long believed you lacked the maturity to appreciate what you had, and clearly I was correct. Olivia let out a strangled, furious sound. You cannot be serious. You cannot just give away the Montgomery estate. Richard looked at her as if she were nothing more than an unpleasant noise in the room. Security will escort you out shortly. You are trespassing. Olivia stumbled back in disbelief, panic overwhelming her fury. You cannot ban me from the mansion. I am Marcus's partner. You do not belong here, Richard said calmly, his authority absolute. And you never will. A low murmur of agreement rippled through the stunned crowd. Marcus looked completely exposed, stunned, and utterly betrayed by his own father. Richard stepped slightly aside and motioned for Evelyn to stand forward, taking center stage. This is her home, he announced to everyone present, his voice booming slightly now. And from this moment on, only she decides who remains in it. Evelyn stood motionless, her shoulders rising gently as she breathed the new, clearer air. For the first time in her life, inside the Montgomery family structure, every single eye watching her did not see a quiet, overlooked wife in the background. They saw the rightful owner, the figure of authority, and the storm that Marcus and Olivia had so carelessly created finally turned back on them with devastating, full force. For a long, profound moment, the hallway remained absolutely silent following Richard's declaration. The shock rippled through every single guest like a massive wave crashing onto solid stone. No one dared to breathe too loudly. No one dared to move a muscle. The balance of the entire evening, the foundation of the Montgomery hierarchy, had shifted so sharply that people needed a full moment to internally process the sheer magnitude of what they had just witnessed. Evelyn felt the heavy weight she had carried in her chest for years slowly dissolve, lifting away like smoke. She stood directly in the center of the hallway, and for the first time in her life, she did not feel small. She did not feel invisible. She felt present, deeply grounded, fully aware of her own voice and inherent worth. She lifted her chin slightly, a subtle, proud movement, and the whispers in the crowd began to grow louder, not with judgment, but with rising admiration. Marcus stared at his father, his eyes wide and vacant with utter disbelief. His cheek still stung painfully from the slap, and his expression flickered rapidly between absolute shock and profound public humiliation. You cannot do this, he finally managed to say, his voice cracking painfully in the middle of the sentence. You cannot just give away the mansion, the family heritage. Richard looked at him with an expression of deep disappointment that seemed to age him instantly, drawing sharp lines around his eyes. I already did years ago because I believed you would one day cherish the woman you married. Instead, you chose to systematically betray her in the very home that was gifted to both of you but entrusted in her name alone. Guests exchanged pointed glances. Some nodded quietly in agreement. Others muttered under their breath about justice finally being served. Marcus looked around desperately, searching for the support he had always relied upon but which he no longer possessed. Olivia stepped forward again, her voice trembling with hysteria. You cannot just throw me out. Marcus wants me here. Richard's eyes hardened further. Marcus is no longer in any position to decide that. Mississippi Olivia's face twisted in outrage. Or you think you can hold the entire family hostage just because you are the patriarch? This is tyranny. Richard crossed his arms, the gesture radiating unassailable authority. The only person held hostage tonight was Evelyn, trapped in your calculated cruelty. Gasps rose across the hallway. Several guests shook their heads openly at Olivia's breathtaking audacity. Marcus grabbed Olivia's arm roughly, trying to silence her. Stop talking. Just stop. But Olivia pulled away harshly, throwing off his touch. Do not tell me what to do. This is all your fault, too. The couple stood in front of everyone, their long-standing alliance visibly cracking wide open, the facade dissolving into mutual blame. The arrogance they had displayed throughout the night seemed to drain from them both in real time. Olivia's professional makeup was now smudged from stress and tears. Marcus's expensive suit looked wrinkled and suddenly cheap. The glamorous facade they had used to belittle Evelyn was now crumbling loudly and publicly. Ms. Hale, the family attorney, stepped into the hallway with her usual imposing, utterly calm demeanor. She looked directly at Marcus, her expression grim. We need to speak now, Marcus. Marcus blinked rapidly, confusion mixing with rising terror. About what? Your position in the company, she replied without inflection. There are serious concerns from the board regarding your conduct. They have asked me to oversee an emergency discussion. They require immediate clarity on your behavior tonight. Marcus's face drained completely of color. The board? You told the board about this. Richard answered for the attorney, his voice clipped and cold. They called me. The video of the incident reached them. It went viral before I could even arrive at the event. Marcus staggered backward slightly. They cannot make decisions based on one isolated, public incident. They can, Ms. Hale said firmly, correcting him. And they will. She paused, letting the severity of the situation sink in. Marcus, this is not one incident. This is merely the culmination of a pattern they have previously warned you about. More whispers erupted, fueled by more judgment. More guests frantically checking their phones as the video of the wine spill continued to spread across social media platforms. Richard turned slightly to address the head of staff. Mr. Bell. Mr. Bell stepped forward instantly. Yes, sir. Escort Olivia out of the mansion. Now. Olivia's eyes widened in raw outrage. You cannot do that. I am with Marcus. Richard responded icily. You are with no one here. Two uniformed security guards walked up quietly behind Olivia. She tried to step back, but their calm, imposing presence left her no room to escape. This is insane, she snapped, hysteria bubbling up. You people are utterly insane. She pointed a trembling, venomous finger directly at Evelyn. She ruined everything. Evelyn met her stare without a hint of fear or remorse. No, you did. Olivia lunged forward as if to argue again, but the guards gently and professionally redirected her toward the exit. Her heels clacked angrily against the marble floor, the sharp, receding sound echoing the finality of her removal from the hallway entirely. The moment Olivia disappeared, a different, quieter tension settled over Marcus. Without his fierce mistress by his side, he looked strangely smaller, entirely unprotected. He reached desperately for his father's arm. Dad, please, you cannot let them do this to me. Richard shook his head slowly, refusing his touch. I am not letting them do anything, Marcus. You did this, and now you will face the consequences alone. Marcus turned toward Evelyn, his eyes pleading for mercy, or perhaps, the old habit of her protection. You would not let them take everything from me. You know me, Evelyn. You know I did not mean for it to go this far. Evelyn stared at him, her expression perfectly unreadable, devoid of the sympathy he sought. The Evelyn who once would have instinctively defended him or softened the truth for him in public no longer existed. She took a single, slow, steady breath before speaking. You did mean it, she said quietly, her voice sounding like a definitive legal statement. Every word you used to tear me down, every lie you told to cover for her. Every time you treated me as something that did not matter, you meant all of it. And now, when the consequences arrive, you want to pretend it was an accident. Marcus shook his head violently, tears starting in his eyes. Evelyn, please, not like this. Then how? She asked calmly, demanding a real answer. How would you like me to respond to the public humiliation you meticulously planned with someone else? He said nothing. His silence, devastatingly, became his absolute admission of guilt. Miss Hale stepped closer to Marcus, pulling his attention away from Evelyn. Marcus, the board will likely suspend you immediately while they investigate. You need to prepare for the possibility that you may lose your executive position entirely. A soft, mournful murmur spread through the hallway. The fate of the Montgomery heir was no longer a private conversation. It was a public, televised collapse. Marcus looked utterly shattered, his voice cracking again, higher this time. I can fix this, I promise. Richard cut him off sternly. No, you cannot. The hallway felt suddenly like a courtroom. Every whisper now sounded like a definitive verdict. Every single stare felt like a sentence being passed. Richard placed a stabilizing hand on Evelyn's shoulder. You do not have to stay for the rest of this discussion, Evelyn. You have said enough for tonight. Evelyn nodded faintly. She felt a complicated mix of strength and bone-deep exhaustion weaving through her body. But overriding both was something else. A pure, exhilarating sense of freedom. As she stepped away from the center of the hallway, the crowd parted for her once more, treating her with a new, profound respect. Some guests murmured supportive words. Some looked deeply apologetic for their earlier silence. Others simply stared in awe at the quiet woman who had just brought a tycoon to his knees. Behind her, Marcus finally sank onto a gilded bench near the wall. His head fell into his hands, his shoulders slumped in defeat. For the first time in his pampered life, he realized he had lost absolutely everything he thought he controlled, and nothing. Not his money, not his name, and certainly not his wife, could save him now. The hallway slowly began to empty as the worst of the chaos settled. Guests began to drift quietly back into the ballroom, but the mood was completely transformed. The bright, glittering energy that had once filled the mansion had been replaced with a quiet, somber awareness. People spoke in low, hushed voices. Some exchanged glances of genuine remorse for not having stepped in sooner to defend Evelyn. Others whispered anxiously about what the consequences would be for the Montgomery legacy. Everyone understood that something deep, profound, and irreversible had just occurred. Evelyn remained standing momentarily at the edge of the hallway, feeling the immense weight of the long, terrible night finally beginning to lift. The shawl around her shoulders felt warm now, comforting, rather than a defensive barrier. Her breath finally steadied. Her hands no longer trembled at all. The dark wine stain remained across her elegant dress, but it no longer felt like a mark of public humiliation. It felt, instead, like a powerful symbol of the exact moment she stopped allowing herself to be diminished by anyone. Her aunt approached and placed a gentle, adoring hand on her arm. You did well, dear. You were incredibly brave. Evelyn allowed herself a small, faint breath of relief. I just said what was true. Caleb stepped quietly beside her, nodding. Sometimes the truth is the bravest thing anyone can ever say. Mr. Bell reappeared, gliding smoothly over the marble floor. Mrs. Montgomery, he said with a respectful, heartfelt nod. Would you like to return to the ballroom? Or perhaps rest quietly in the lounge? We can escort you anywhere you choose. Evelyn glanced toward the open double doors of the ballroom. Dozens of eyes looked her way, not with judgment or gossip now, but with something closer to deep admiration. She had been silent and invisible for so long. Tonight, she felt an essential element shift inside her. She no longer wanted to hide. I will go back, she said, her decision firm. Her aunt smiled, a proud, watery relief in her eyes. Caleb nodded his silent approval. Together, they walked toward the ballroom entrance. The murmurs softened immediately as she entered. The vast, glittering room, once filled with brittle laughter and superficial cheer, quieted profoundly, as though acknowledging her powerful presence. People straightened in their seats. Some stood. A few even clapped softly before stopping themselves, uncertain if applause was appropriate in such a tense, serious moment. But the intention was clear. This was support, recognition, and newfound respect. Evelyn stepped further inside the ballroom. She felt a surprising, centered steadiness in her chest. The piano music resumed, softer this time, almost reverent, providing a hushed background. A woman she barely knew, a member of the social elite, approached her first. "We are so sorry for what happened to you," she said sincerely. "You did not deserve any of it." Another guest followed, offering a simple statement. "You handled yourself with incredible grace and dignity." Another added, reaching out a hesitant hand. "If you ever need anything, please let us know. We saw what happened." Evelyn nodded politely, absorbing the genuine warmth. She did not immediately know how to respond to this unexpected kindness she had never anticipated receiving from within this calculating family circle. It felt strange and foreign, but it also felt profoundly right. Then Richard Montgomery entered the ballroom. Conversations instantly halted again. The crowd parted for him naturally, the way waves move aside for a battleship that has sailed through these waters many times before. His expression had softened considerably since the confrontation. The hard, angry lines of fury had faded, replaced by something closer to sorrow, but also unmistakable pride in his daughter-in-law. He approached Evelyn directly, stopping a polite distance away. "Is there anything at all you require, Evelyn?" he asked. "Anything I can arrange?" Evelyn shook her head gently. "Thank you, Richard. I am all right." He nodded once, the gesture confirming his acceptance of her strength. "I want you to know," he said, lowering his voice so that only she could hear, "that what happened tonight will not be forgotten. Not by the family, not by the board of directors, and certainly not by me." She looked up at him, her eyes steady. "I never wanted to cause trouble." "You did not," Richard said firmly, correcting her again. "You exposed it." For the first time, she saw a slight glimmer of moisture in the older man's eyes. A flicker of tears, enough to reveal the crushing depth of disappointment he felt for his son's actions. "I am truly sorry for what Marcus did," he said, his voice husky with suppressed emotion. "And for the years you endured in silence, believing you had no choice." Evelyn's own voice softened in response. "Thank you." He took a slow, measured breath, regaining his composure. "The board is removing Marcus from all decision-making roles until further notice. They unanimously believe he is unfit to represent the family's interests at this time." Evelyn bowed her head slightly in acknowledgement. She did not feel triumph. She felt an immense, final sense of closure. "And Evelyn," Richard continued quietly, "this home is entirely yours to command. If you ever wish to renovate, sell, or change anything about the estate, you have full, absolute authority." She blinked, overwhelmed by the finality of the gift. "I do not know what to say." "Say nothing," he replied with a gentle firmness. "Just live. Live freely. Live without fear. This house was given to you because I saw a core of strength in you long before you ever saw it in yourself." Her eyes warmed with gratitude, reflecting the light of the ballroom. "Thank you." Richard placed a hand. End of segment. Richard's gentle hand rested on her shoulder, a silent reassurance, before he stepped forward to face the assembled guests. The hum of conversation immediately ceased. The noise died in the throats of the onlookers. His authority was absolute, filling the vast space. The guests straightened in their seats, waiting for the verdict. "Tonight," Richard announced, his voice carrying the cool, precise weight of generations of power, "we witnessed a profound lapse in judgment and behavior utterly unacceptable to the Montgomery name." His gaze swept across the room, lingering momentarily on the empty space where Marcus had stood. "Let this be clear. We will not tolerate cruelty, manipulation, or disrespect, whether beneath this roof or within the broader business realm. From this moment forward, Evelyn is the undisputed mistress of this mansion. Her directives stand above all others. Her word is final." Evelyn inhaled a sharp, quiet breath. The declaration of the title, Mistress of the Mansion, struck her deeper than she could have anticipated. It was not merely an honorific. It was the key to the cage she had been locked in for years. She had never campaigned for this authority, yet the confrontation had forced the claim, hardening the soft edges of her character into something resilient and undeniable. She had earned it through endurance and defiance. Richard continued, his delivery concise and final. Marcus will not be rejoining us this evening. He has been escorted away from the formal spaces and is now in the private study, where he awaits a necessary conversation with the full board of directors. The implication was unmistakable. This was not just a social rebuke, but a professional execution. Low, urgent murmuring erupted again. A few of Marcus's older allies frowned openly, but the majority, tired of his arrogance, nodded their profound approval. The pianist, sensing the gravity of the shift, allowed the music to fade completely, leaving a vacuum of silence heavier than sound. Richard turned fully toward her, his expression a mixture of pride and solicitousness. "Evelyn," he asked, his voice softening just slightly, "would you care to address the room?" Evelyn hesitated for a breath. She felt the pressure of dozens of expectant, judging eyes resting solely on her. Her heart accelerated, the rapid rhythm returning, but this time the adrenaline surge was untainted by panic. It was the electrifying rush of potential, the sudden, fierce blooming of possibility that accompanies the breaking of chains. Drawing upon a reservoir of strength she hadn't known she possessed, she began her slow, deliberate walk toward the center of the vast salon. Her movement was graceful, yet imbued with a steel-like purpose. The room watched her advance. When she reached the focal point, she stood tall, her posture commanding. She clasped her hands loosely over the silk shawl draped across her shoulders, grounding herself, and began to speak in a voice that was quiet, articulate, and unwavering. "I stand before you tonight not to speak of anger," she stated clearly, the simple words cutting through the heavy air. "I will not waste breath on revenge, nor indulge in the satisfaction of shame." Her gaze held steady, defying anyone to look away. "Instead, I want to talk about dignity, about the absolute, non-negotiable importance of knowing your own fundamental worth, especially when the world or those closest to you work tirelessly to convince you that you possess none." The attendees leaned forward collectively, drawn in by the unexpected power of her quiet confession. The great room was absolutely breathless. "For years within this family," she continued, a faint tremor of past pain underlying her resolve, "I convinced myself that silence was the keeper of peace, the protector of stability." She paused, her eyes glinting with newfound clarity. "Tonight, I realized a horrifying truth. Silence only serves to protect the abusers, the cruel, and the wrong people." Richard Montgomery, standing slightly behind her, visibly closed his eyes, a reaction of profound, internalized emotion. Evelyn drew a deep, restorative breath. "I will not, for one more day, live in that suffocating silence." A strong, palpable ripple of collective approval surged through the high society gathering. Heads nodded vigorously. A handful of guests started a spontaneous, soft burst of applause, quickly stifled but profoundly meaningful. The sentiment of validation was undeniable. Evelyn descended from the elevated space and rejoined the haven of her aunt and Caleb. The rigid, brittle tension that had gripped the room fractured and began to dissipate, replaced by a softer air of understanding. The tone of conversations instantly shifted from tense, quiet judgment to audible, relieved acceptance. Evelyn felt an extraordinary lightness lift from her shoulders. She was braver, fundamentally altered, and, most importantly, seen. Not as Marcus's wife or a quiet accessory, but as Evelyn. Marcus's public disgrace was no longer the central topic of the evening. Her own emergence, her self-actualization, was the new, defining narrative. For the first time since the day she married into the formidable Montgomery lineage, Evelyn experienced a profound sensation she had long relegated to memory. She felt utterly, unequivocally free.